Hello and welcome to another gear update on Air Arms Hunting South Africa, and today we're going to be looking at optics and more specifically SWFA rifle scopes. Now those of you that do know SWFA scopes will absolutely agree with me that they are some of the most rugged and well built scopes that you'll find anywhere in the world and come at some of the best price points you'll find anywhere in the world. And the only reason why I haven't really been able to speak about them in the few years that I've been having my channel running is because I haven't been able to get hold of them. Now there are a number of reasons for this. Number one, they are only available through SWFA in the US. They are able to bring the scopes to you at really good prices because they cut out the middleman with distribution. In other words, they don't have a lot of distributors all over the world that take a cut for themselves and lower the overall price of the optic. They sell to you straight, and that does make it harder to get hold of these scopes, but I think it's very worth it to make the effort to try and find a way to get hold of these scopes, because when you do, you'll find that you're getting them for a really good price for the build quality and what they have to offer in terms of features. We're going to be looking at three different scopes today. The first one is on the FX Impact here and is the SWFA SS3 to 15 by 42. It's the first focal plane scope, obviously variable magnification 3 to 15, and this is a mil scope, this particular one. So it's got milliradian turrets and a mil reticle. The second scope we're going to look at is on this FX Streamline right over here, which I'm hoping to review quite soon, by the way. FX Streamline's a pretty new gun, and this is a fixed 16 scope, the SS 16 by 42. So essentially this fixed 16 is exactly the same as this 3 to 15, but the 3 to 15 is first focal plane and the fixed 16 is a fixed magnification scope. And there are actually positives and negatives to both. So just because the variable magnification gives you more zoom, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the better scope. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But first of all, let's look at the third scope I have here. Third scope I have is definitely the best out of the three, also the most expensive of the three. This is the SS 5 to 20 by 50 HD FFP. The HD stands for high density. So the glass in this scope is quite a bit better, although it's not extremely noticeable. If you take the time to look through all of these, you will notice a difference. It's high density glass. It lets the light through a little bit better. The clarity is a little bit better. And what I particularly like about the scope is the fact that it has 10 mils per revolution instead of 5 mils per revolution. And the turrets are resettable with an Allen key, whereas these ones you have to loosen 3 Allen keys to reset the turret. So this one is just a little bit easier in that department. And obviously the 5 to 20 magnification range, 20 times is really good for when you want to zoom in on a small target, or whether you're shooting really far and you need something that you can see out a bit further. So that's a basic overview of these three scopes. Let's go through them one by one. But first of all, I want to tell you some basic history of SWFA optics, simply because I think it will give you a really good idea of why they're so rugged. Basically, these scopes were actually designed for the military, for the US military, and are still used in the US military today. They were designed under a different name at the time, but they were built to military specifications. In other words, they were made to be ridiculously rugged out in the field. Obviously, soldiers deployed out in the field had to rely on these scopes for their lives. And so there was no room for error in terms of build quality. They really had to design them very well. These things, you can smash them around, you can hit them against things, and they will stay true. You can crank the turrets all the way up, you can crank them all the way back, and they will stick to zero. No problem, absolutely no problem. The tracking is perfect. I've actually done a test with these exact scopes here, where I've cranked the turrets 20 mils up, fired a few shots, 20 mils down, fired a few shots, another 20 mils up, another 20 mils down, and it tracks absolutely perfectly. It makes all my other scopes look like absolute garbage. They're not garbage. Some of them are very good. Like the Hawk Frontier is a very good scope and actually comes in the same price range as this one. But the quality of this is definitely better than any other scope I have there. And those of you who've watched my channel will know what scopes I do have. So the fact that the scope is a military spec scope says something about its quality. You can rely on these, and that's what I love about them, especially when you get into turret tracking. Yes, if you are just basically doing shooting where you're shooting at the same distance every time, or you're just planning to hold over the whole time, then you don't need to have extremely reliable turrets, because you set them and you leave them and you use the reticle. But once you get into dialing your turrets for long range shooting, and that's something that I do very, very regularly now, you need to have a scope that can track properly, and these ones will do the job for a very good price. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about the history of SWFA and the military spec quality of the optics, let me tell you just what makes these three scopes very different. So this one, the 3-15 on this scope, as I said, it's first focal plane, which means that the reticle zooms, and I am not going back from first focal plane scopes. I reviewed those Optizan EVX scopes a while back, and I really did like those scopes, and that is what basically sealed the deal for me with first focal plane scopes. And to be honest, I have in the past looked at some other first focal plane scopes and not liked them purely because of the reticle design. If the reticle is too thick at maximum magnification or too thin at minimum magnification, then they can be quite horrible to look through. You know, the thick reticle, just you can't see your target properly. It's too thin, you struggle to actually get your eye in focus, and that sucks. These are pretty spot on. I think that they could perhaps be a little bit thinner. The reticle could be a little bit thinner at full magnification, but apart from that, you know, it's still completely usable out in the field, and it's definitely a step up from the second focal plane scopes. If you're going to do any zooming out in the field, because you're going to know with the first focal plane scope, you can be aiming at something, you know you've got to, you know, adjust 4 mils, let's say for example, for a 90-meter shot. You can crank the magnification without worrying about lining up those lines perfectly. You can crank it to whatever you want. You can either dial 4 mils on here, or you can hold 4 mils on the reticle, and there's no maths involved. You just dial it and you go, and that is really, really nice. These are made with MOA turrets and reticles as well, but I personally like to stick to mils, simply because I work with meters, I work in metric units, and the mil scopes are way better suited to metric, because 10 centimeters will span exactly 1 mil at 100 meters, and if you try to convert that to yards, it becomes a little bit more confusing. So mils for metric, MOA if you're using yards. MOA is probably the easier one to use, but I like mils. Okay, another thing I really like about this particular scope is it has got the side focus over here, and it focuses down to 6 meters. So for airgun shooting, you need a scope that focuses down, and this one is really good, really nice and easy, really smooth to focus down. So that's really great. But you do pay for the side focus. So this particular scope right here is, I think, $699. So let's just say $700. And that is not extremely expensive for what you're getting in the scope, but for most people who are looking to buy an air rifle, that is quite pricey, especially since these are, you know, a lot of the scopes that I've got on these rifles here are actually a lot less than $700. But what I will say is, if you're looking for a really good quality scope that you never need to replace at any time in your life, if you're paying as much money as you're paying for something like the Impact, it's definitely worth spending the money on a good, reliable scope. And this one, I think the size fits this rifle quite well as well. So if you're looking for a variable power scope, this one's really good. The 3-15 is really good. However, I actually absolutely fell in love with the fixed magnification scopes, like this one on the FX Streamline, and I'll tell you why. Any of you who have any experience in photography or videography will know that prime lenses, in other words lenses that have fixed magnifications or fixed zooms, tend to have much better optical quality than variable magnification lenses. And it's exactly the same in these scopes. When you add a variable magnification element, you're adding more glass inside the scope, which means that light has to be bent and light has to pass through that glass more often, and you're going to get things like chromatic aberration and a bit of ghosting, and you know, the edges aren't going to be quite as sharp, contrast not going to be as good. I noticed a very, very clear difference between the fixed magnification scope, in this case the fixed 16, and the first focal plane versions of these scopes. This one is still very, very good because it's got that HD glass. This one is still good. It's still better than my Hawk and probably on par with the Optizan scopes, but this one is definitely quite a bit clearer, the fixed 16. So this one on 15 times and this one on 16 times, the 16x fixed magnification is the very clear winner in terms of optical clarity. I also like the fact that the reticle on the fixed 16 is a bit finer than the first focal plane scope at 15 times, and the fine reticle really helps you to zone in on that target. I actually used this exact scope at Extreme Bench Rest this year, and while other guys were shooting with 20 times magnification and up, because the glass clarity on the scope was so good, I had no problem shooting at 100 yards with a 16x scope, and that says something about it. Obviously, the fixed 16 would not be good for all situations if you're doing a lot of close range shooting, or you're shooting at a moving target, or you're just shooting at night, for example, where you need that field of view. This is not going to work. You're going to need to opt for the variable power scope or a fixed 5 times or something, but that's also not going to help you when you need to actually have it zoomed in. I like the fixed 16. In fact, if I had to choose one of these, believe it or not, I would choose the fixed magnification scope. And another thing to note is that the fixed magnification scopes also tend to be a lot more rugged than the variable power scopes. Again, because there isn't so much going on inside. It's very, very simple inside. You can really knock this thing around and it's not going to move even a micrometer. It's going to stick exactly where it is. And this scope, in terms of price points, this one right here, fixed 16, is $299, believe it or not. For a military spec scope, $299. That is fantastic. As I said, this one is $699, so it's more than double the price for that one. Now, this version has the parallax all the way back here. Also goes down, well, this one goes down to 10 meters. This one goes down 6 meters. So this one doesn't focus down quite as much, but who's going to shoot under 10 meters anyway? Nobody. So this one has the parallax at the back. It's a little bit less user-friendly than the side parallax. However, the side parallax version of the fixed magnification scopes cost about 25% more. They cost $399 instead of $299. And I don't think, well, at least for me personally, I don't think it would be worth it paying an extra 25% for something that's just, you know, what, 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters difference in reaching out here to do your focusing. So I personally have no issues with the parallax at the back. I really like it, and for $299 you're not going to find anything better than this. Now, the third scope over here is actually something that I got after getting the scope over here. I wanted to buy, I've heard a lot of good things about the SWFA scopes from some extremely reputable reviewers out there. Guys like, you know, the Sniper's Hide reviews, Toborosaurus Rex, who does the Sniper 101 series, shot a beer can at like 1,200 yards with a 338 Lapua. Those guys know what they're talking about, and they gave these scopes extremely good reviews, but I wanted to actually purchase one myself before I said a lot of good things about them. So I bought the fixed 16 scope, and I got these two afterwards. And this one, the 5-20, I bought specifically for my 260 Remington as a scope that would last me for basically forever. I was willing to spend a little bit more money and get something a little bit better, because I knew that that rifle I'm going to keep for the rest of my life, and I wanted a scope that could also stay on that rifle for the rest of the rifle's life, and this was the one. Now, if you want to shoot with an air gun, I would not recommend this scope, simply because it only focuses down to 50 meters. So unless you only plan to shoot further than 50 meters, which many air gunners will never do, this is probably not the right scope for you. If you have a firearm and you plan to do long range shooting, or any shooting for that matter, this is a really, really good scope to look at. It's going to pretty much be on par with the build qualities of your Vortex Razors, your Vortex Vipers, perhaps even your Night Force scopes. Maybe not quite, but they're up there with Night Force and scopes that are really, really known and have been proven to be quality optics out in the field. So this is really good. I wanted to get the 10mm turrets simply because with that 260 Remington, I'm going to be shooting out to about 1,000 meters regularly, and I didn't want to, in the heat of the moment, forget which revolution I'm on with the turrets. 10 mils per revolution is really, really nice to have. And oh, there goes my light. Hold on a second, I'm going to need to replace that battery. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, I'm still trying to get the lighting in this room sorted out properly. We were talking about the SWFA 5-20, and I can't remember what we were talking about, but are a few things I do want to add. Objective lens size is 50mm on this scope right over here, whereas on the other two scopes it's 42mm. The 50mm objective lens I think is probably quite necessary for this particular scope because it goes up to 20 times magnification, and the extra little bit of eye relief and light transmission is quite important. The bigger objective lens allows more light to come through, whereas these ones, obviously not at quite a high magnification, don't really need anything as large as 50 mils. I'm very happy with light transmission through these scopes. So yeah, very happy with the way that these scopes are designed. And the last thing I want to mention is the price point on the 5-20. 5-20 is, I think, about $1,299 for the non-illuminated version, like the one I have here. Illuminated version is a little bit more. So that is quite a big step up from either of these two scopes. From $699 to $1,299 is a really big step up. So unless you're really going to put it on, let's say, a sniper rifle or something you're going to need to shoot long range with, where you're going to be dialing those turrets all the time, you'll probably do perfectly fine with the 3-15. I just happen to have gone with this one because I think those extra little features on the scope are going to be a little bit better suited to what I'm planning to do with my 260 Remington. And on the note of 260 Remington, I know I said last time that would be my next gear update video, but I've almost forgotten about these scopes. The next gear update video will be the 260 Remington that's going to be in that beautiful GRS stock over there, and some of the reloading equipment that I've bought for the 260 as well. So thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.